welcome to Garden Fork Radio. Is this your first time that you are listening? It's a very interesting show. It's an eclectic mix of DIY, and today I have my friend Will from the Weekend Homestead. Welcome, sir.
How are you doing, Eric?
I'm great. I have no complaints.
Good.
Everyone, you cannot listen to this episode at 2x speed because Will talks so fast.
I promised I'll talk a little slower this time. I was listening to the last podcast we did a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, wow, I need to really slow it down a little bit.
Two people said, they said, wow, that guy talks really fast.
I used to be an auctioneer in my previous life, so, you know, it's just in my style.
That's fine. That's totally fine.
Wait till I have a coffee.
So today we have a couple of topics, how to build an outhouse, and you might think that's simple, and it's not. And then some project planning, and then we're going to talk about some solar panel projects we have some ideas for. So, Will, on the Weekend Homestead YouTube channel, you have a series about building an outhouse, and I'm like, well, what's so complicated about that? I'm like, you just dig a hole and you put a shed over it, you know? So what is so complicated about that?
You would think it would be pretty straightforward, but actually you can do it illegally and just dig a hole and put a building over it and you're good to go. But if you want to do it legally, which is the way we wanted to, you have to go get a permit. And then I was surprised when we built the outhouse. When we did our remodel, it was about a page of information that we had to kind of follow for the guidelines and stuff like that in the county. When we got the packet for the outhouse, it was 6 pages long, which was shocking to me that there is that much information that a person has to know about distances and depths and soil types and building construction. And do you line it? Do you have a certified tank that you put underneath it and so on? So there's a lot of reasons why they have it. And I was talking to the person from the county, and the one thing they said was the reason why all these rules are kind of in place is back in the day when people lived closer together and outhouses were closer together and wells were closer to outhouses and things like that, there was a lot of concern about contamination and people getting sick and things like that. So all these rules kind of came in play. Well, once indoor plumbing became a thing and everybody started doing that, nobody really updated the rules on the outhouses. So unfortunately, the rules are pretty complex for most jurisdictions just because of the fact that people used to live closer together and, you get your water from a well next to your property. So that kind of started our research phase and caused us to pause in the beginning of this to figure out, okay, what are all the rules and why do you have them? And all the rules they have are actually make really good sense.
Yeah.
To keep insects out, keep animals out of the outhouse, not to contaminate your own water source, not to do anything damaging where you could damage your neighbor's property and so on. So after we researched it, then we were able to dive in and kind of understand the differences of what you can and cannot do.
So I think the first question people are going to want to know is, why did you build an outhouse?
Sure. The property itself had an outhouse that was originally built, I think, in like the 70s or 80s. And I'll be honest with you, it was getting full. So you have two choices. You can either empty it out, which most companies that do septic servicing won't service an old outhouse. They won't. The second option is to move it. Because our property is broken up. Let me rewind for the new listeners who might not know this, but our property is broken up into two parts. One part is on the grid, which is down by the road, and then another part is off the grid. There's no power, there's no water, there's no sewer, there's no anything there. So it's very rustic. That's where the apple orchard, our barn, and all that stuff is. Well, up there they had an outhouse, and instead of having everybody run, the half mile down the hill down to the house or whatever, we thought it'd be nice to have a bathroom facility up on the upper property. Yeah. So we started researching it, and they wouldn't service our old outhouse that was there. And you can either have it pumped, but they won't service it because it's an old one, or you can move it, which unfortunately most of the laws say that when you move it, you have to become code compliant. So we thought, okay, let's scrap it all together. The building's kind of falling apart anyways, and we'll build something brand new from scratch. So that's how we started the project. Was originally there was an outhouse there. Now we're replacing it with a new one.
All right. Well, so you have an off-the-grid house, and you wanted an off-the-grid toilet as well.
Yep. And the outhouse itself, actually, there's really only two types of outhouses. One's called open pit, which is basically a hole in the ground that you line with timbers on the inside, and that's it. And then the other kind is one where you get a tank. I don't know if you've ever been driving past like a rural farm store or whatever, and you see these big circular black ball things sitting out in the parking lot, but those are outhouse septic tanks. And basically you just dig a big hole and you put the tank in and then put gravel in and then pour a concrete slab over the top of it. Now you have basically a foundation with this sealed chamber underneath, and then you build the outhouse over the top of it and you're good to go. The one important thing is the reason why we went with the tank versus just the hole in the ground is most municipalities have a rule that state that now your outhouse has to be serviced once every 5 years. And what I mean by service is a company comes out and they take the material out of it and pump it out just like you do on a conventional septic tank. Well, if you have an open pit, service companies won't service it because they're afraid they'll vacuum up some of the dirt or cause some erosion or those types of things.
Yeah, they could ruin the equipment on their truck. So.
Yep, exactly. So the rule doesn't state that you can't have an open pit outhouse. The issue is that once it fills up, you have to move it. Well, you can't really move a 6-inch thick 30 or 6 foot by 6 foot concrete slab very easily to a new location. Instead, it'd be easier to have it pumped. So for us, it was, we could buy $100 worth of timbers, or we could buy a tank for $250. And now we have the ability to have it serviced and we never have to move it, never have to do anything. So now basically that structure is going to be there till my kids are there. And it'll be able to be serviced and taken care of, and we'll be able to keep it clean and nice and everything like that. So, there's a little bit of technology that goes into installing an outhouse to make it a nicer experience than, just a hole in the ground and a seat there. So if that makes sense.
Well, I saw there's a vent off the side of it.
Yep. So you put a vent that goes from the pit area out. And then what I added was in the marine space, they have a 4-inch inline fan that can cause negative pressure. Mm-hmm. So we put that in the pipe going up. And then so when you turn on the light switch, which is on a little battery, there's a little 12-volt battery we have in there that runs both the fan and the light on the ceiling. So when you walk in and flip on the switch, it turns on that fan and it drafts all the smells out of the tank up and out of the building to cause negative pressure in there, so that then it basically works like a bathroom fan, so you don't have the smell or the odor or any of the problems that you'd have with an older outhouse. So putting a little bit of technology in there with the 12-volt battery, the lights, and the fan, and it all works awesome. I just picked it all up on Amazon. They delivered it up, and we installed it, and it was really easy.
So this isn't a composting toilet then?
No. So composting toilets is something a little different. Composting toilet is basically you could have a building and you could put a bucket or a vessel or something underneath the seat, and then a person could put sawdust and that type of material on top of the use, and then you turn it over, and then eventually you can take that bucket out of there and go dump it on the ground somewhere. It's very odd about the rules, but if you go below grade, there's a whole bunch of rules. So if you dig a hole in the ground and you use it as a toilet, there's a whole bunch of rules. But if you go above ground in a bucket and then dump it on the ground, there's no rules. So a composting toilet is a way a lot of people go because it makes it really, really easy. And actually, there's some pretty sophisticated composting toilets on the market today where they'll turn the material over inside of it and it'll dry everything out. And it's actually a really nice experience. It actually looks like a regular toilet in your house. It just doesn't use any water.
Wow. So for the outhouse that you built, we had to dig a hole. You needed a backhoe for this.
Yep.
And then it looks like a large. It looks like it could be something that could be lofted into space. This black round thing with like another round part sticking out the side.
Yeah, I actually posted it on Instagram, and people are like, "Are you going to outer space or something like that? Are you launching that in the air?" Because it actually looks like. Do you remember the old Looney Tunes cartoons where they had like the cannonball and it was like the big black cannonball or whatever with the big fuse coming out of it? I was going to get a piece of rope and stick it out of the top of it and say I bought some new fireworks in Wisconsin.
So, is there anything? So after each person uses the outhouse toilet. I mean, I'm always thinking like composting toilets, they'll throw sawdust on the top or wood ash on the top or something. It's just you kind of go and then you just put the lid back down and walk away?
Basically, yeah. The only item that I added to it was, if you're familiar with RVs, camping, or boating, RV toilets have deodorizing, sanitizing antifreeze, basically, that you can put in there that then kind of knocks down the smell and takes care of it. We added that to the bottom. And then a couple times a year, I'll take some lime and I'll put it down in there to kind of neutralize the base. But for the most part, because of the negative pressure that we have from the vent, which is very similar to actually if you've ever been on an airplane, airplanes use the same vacuum technology and everything like that in their toilets to make it so that they work on the airplanes. It's the exact same principle of it is we're basically moving the smelly air out of the space. And when you go in and turn the switch on, it stays on for 15 minutes. So even after you're done, you leave, it continues to circulate the air inside of there. And then it turns off and it goes back to a regular state. And it smells like pine trees in there, to be honest with you.
I never really thought about how toilets worked in the airplane. And now you got me thinking. So,
yeah, it's one of those things where when I decided that we were going to do this, I spent a couple of months kind of reading and researching and thinking about different things. And then, it eventually becomes like, I don't one day just go, hey, we're going to dig a hole in the ground and we're going to make an outhouse. I actually kind of thought through, and we actually recycled a lot of the products that we had left from the remodel that we did on the house on the outhouse. And one of them that has gotten probably the most attention out of anything, and if anybody goes and watches the video, you'll see there's a glass door on the front of the outhouse, and you would not believe how many people have commented of, you have a glass door in there, people can see in, or, and just,
hey.
People are going, because like if you're in there, you can see right in, because it's a floor to ceiling glass door. Originally, it was going to be the glass door that went between the 3-season room on the house and the 4-season room. Well, when we upgraded to make it a 4-season room, in both spaces, I didn't need the door anymore, but I couldn't return it because it was actually, it's the silliest story, but it's a custom ordered door because it only had one hole in it. If you know exterior doors, they usually have two. I ordered one with one hole in it. Well, because of that, they wouldn't take the return. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? And they were like, well, we're going to build an outhouse. Let's use the door for that. I watched one of your videos about frosting glass, and I'm going to do that same frosting to it, but it got too cold, so I couldn't do it this fall. But people are really, even people come up and visit, they're looking at the outhouse like, there's a window right there, like right into the space. So
when I used to go to nightclubs in New York City, there was a couple of years where it was really cool to have, first of all, they have unisex bathrooms and all the doors were glass, but they had this high-tech glass where once you entered the bathroom, the glass would frost itself.
Gotcha.
From an electrical charge, basically would there was like a layer of film in the glass, and it would become opaque. But it would I mean, there was kind of the way of being like if the in crowd knew what it did, but so I knew how they worked. But it was just kind of interesting. You had a couple of drinks and you had to use the bathroom. And you're like, oh, there's a glass door there. So
yeah, it's I get a couple of people who come up and they'll look at it and be like, you have a glass door there, but like all the paneling, all the materials, all the shingles, all the items basically in the outside of the building were all left over from either the screen porch project or the remodel of the house or whatever. And it's like, you have a small amount of material left. I can't really build a 10 by 10 shed, or I can't build anything. So we decided to build a really nice outhouse.
It is really nice. And it's 3 or 4 videos, right?
Yeah, it's a 4-part series. So I did one about how I prepped the hole and made the decision to put the tank in. The second one is the first time I've ever done concrete work. I've never done concrete before. We went online and read a little bit about it, and I gave it a try. And I figured if anything, screwing up an outhouse is a lot easier than screwing up a garage floor or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we have building the building and then finishing it.
With cement, I've learned that you'll need more bags than you think and use less water than you think.
Actually, one other one that was kind of interesting that I didn't know is the longer you keep the top of your cement wet, the harder your cement is.
Yes.
So after I finished it, you take a water bottle and you spritz it with water. So there's a good layer of water over the top, and then put plastic on it. And then about, I don't know, like an hour or two later, come back, peel the plastic off and spritz it again with water, and then put it back on there for the night. And the next day when you come out, you'll have super hard concrete.
Yeah, it does something with the cure process of cement, but the longer you can keep it moist, the harder it will be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Learned something. Who knows?
I'm always guilty of, I buy a bag of pre-mixed cement and I just split the thing open and I mix it right in the bag, and I always add too much water and it becomes soupy. So
I use a 5-gallon bucket, actually. I'll dump like a third of the bag into the 5-gallon bucket and then scoop a little water in it and then kind of figure out where I'm at. And then I'll either add more material or more water and just keep doing that till the bucket gets heavy enough that I can't lift it up. And then I'll dump it and do it again if I'm doing a small batch, because then you can kind of regulate the powder a little bit better in there.
So real quick, a shameless plug for our Patreon contributors. If you're interested in supporting Garden Fork on a monthly basis, kind of like NPR, you can give X number of dollars a month through our Patreon campaign. It can be as low as $1 a month. We're asking for $3 a month, which is like a magazine subscription. But I wanted to thank some more contributors. Laust L, Frederic, Sarah C, Dan R, who I know is active on our Facebook page, Lisa N, Paul N, Georgia C, Teresa A, Anthony N, who was also active in our Facebook group, Randy H, another active person, William B, Isabel S, Howard T, and Gandalf. Very cool. Oh, and also Julia M. Cannot forget about Julia M. So there you go. If you're interested, it'll be in the show notes here, but go to patreon.com/gardenfork. Thank you. So this kind of segues into, we also wanted to talk about was planning, project planning, and you obviously planned this thing. My planning is a little more scattershot than yours. You're the more organized person here. So how do you do that?
Well, I kind of start with, and it sounds a little Tony Robbins-ish when I say this to people, because people ask all the time, how do you do these projects or how do you figure this stuff out? And I say I start with a vision or a thought of what the end of it's going to look like. Like, what do I want the doors to look like? What do I want the walls to look like? Do I even need this? And how am I going to use whatever we're going to build? And I kind of sit around and I think about like all the little details of it, of like what kind of stone do we want to put on it? Or, is there a little gadgety function that we want to put in or something like that? Or is there a technology that we could take advantage of to make it better? And I think about the end product and I write that down, and then I work backwards and go, okay, well, if I want a window there, I got to figure out the size of the window, okay? And if I'm going to install it, I'm going to have to get the right framing material. And I kind of work backwards through a project that way and really do some research to figure out if it's something that we need and then all the components to go into it. Once you work backwards, eventually you get to the starting point, which is, okay, how do I start on this thing? And then you just start at step one and just follow your plan all the way through, and you can finish a project pretty reliably, pretty quickly, and usually pretty close to budget because you've already thought through a lot of the stuff.
Wow. That's not like what I do.
Yours is kind of like, hey, I'm going to go build this and just go to it.
Well, no, I do plan, but I don't have a final vision. I don't know exactly how it's going to look. I'm like, well, it'd be nice to have a wall there,
Yeah.
Well, like what I want to do right now is I just bought a solar panel from my neighbor because I just want to figure out how they work. And I put in a solar system for my buddy, but it was like a turnkey system. It was very easy to do. But I would like to run my computer off of a solar panel. And
very cool.
It's easy to do. You have some batteries, you have an inverter, but then you're converting 12 volt stored power up to 120 volts, and you plug in your computer. But the computer, most of it runs on 12 volt or 5 volt. Because there's another transformer in the back of the computer that steps the voltage back down to 12 or 5 volts to run the computer. So is there a way I could go direct from there's a regulator off the battery right into the back of the computer? Could I hotwire it somehow? Does anyone out there know this? Let me know. radio@gardenfork.tv. So I will research it. I'll look around, but I have more of an elliptical planning process.
I find it interesting you're talking about the solar piece, because actually that's so in the wintertime, we tend not to do a lot of projects. So I do a lot of thinking. And that's when my wife sees me sitting with a little notepad or the computer and the iPad or whatever, and I'm going back and forth and I don't talk for a couple hours and I'm just kind of working on something. She's like, okay, what are you building? What are you designing now? And it's funny that you bring up a solar panel system, because I'm currently researching solar, because we're hoping on the upper property to get some solar panels up there so I can have lights in the barn and lights in the orchard shed and, a little bit of power out there, because everything's kind of run off generators, and you don't really want to go to the quiet nature of Wisconsin and listen to a generator drone all day long.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to solve for that problem of how do I make it so that, maybe the generator only runs for an hour in the morning, and then that produces enough energy during the wintertime to run all the lights and power up there. And then during the summer, when we have a lot of sunshine, they run off a solar panel instead, that kind of thing, to kind of lower your carbon footprint and to, make it so that you have a system. Because, I mean, to bring electricity into the woods is exceptionally expensive. So I could easily probably build a system for less money that would service our needs, but I have to kind of learn about it first, which I've never done solar before. So it's kind of fun to read books and read articles online and watch some videos on YouTube and that kind of stuff to figure out what the end vision is going to look like. And then once I come up with that end vision, then I'll work backwards from that and design a system, and then we'll put it in place.
Well, a couple things I know from help my friend outfit his cabin is the batteries are not as efficient in cold weather. But they still do work. And the other cool thing is that there's a whole bunch of light fixtures now and light bulbs that are 12 volt. So you don't have to bump up the voltage to 120. You can have your barn with 12 volt compact fluorescents or 12 volt LEDs, which is really cool.
Yeah, with LED technology, like years ago, what I've learned so far, to the same point that you're saying, within the last 5 years, solar has become a lot more affordable, one, because the panels are cheaper, but two, you don't need as many, because before you used to have a 100-watt light bulb that you had to power, let's say, and it used 100 watts, which means you needed to have enough panels to support it, enough batteries to support it. Well, now you can get a light bulb that will produce 8 watts of power or 10 watts of power and give you the same amount of light. Well, now you need 1/10 the system. So you can have either more lights to cover a bigger area with the same size system, or you can have a system that's much, much smaller. So I actually think that we're kind of on a verge of kind of all the right things coming together, that solar might become something that people use more as they get cheaper and as the technology gets better. It's kind of crazy how it's all come along in the last 5 years.
And the wiring is so much easier.
Oh yeah, just 2 wires and things like that. That's why I actually, going back to the outhouse, that's why I wired it in 12 volt, because we have a 12 volt light on the ceiling in that 12 volt marine system. And then I have a little box on the outside of the building that at some point in time, when I bring in solar from the rest of the place, I'll just run a 12 volt wire underground from the main building over to the structure. It's only 30 feet, plug it into the box. And now I don't have that battery inside the outhouse anymore. It's all run off the main system.
Neat. All we need now is either a hydrogen cell or cold fusion,
Well, I was working on cold fusion, but I lost the notebook that I had all the notes in. So unfortunately, I have to start over again.
So the world will continue to heat up. By the way, I'm going to go donate blood today, or I don't know if you donate blood. I give blood.
I think you donate it. I think it's donation.
Anyway, I'm going to the Red Cross this afternoon, so I have to hydrate a lot. The more water you drink, like 2-3 days before, your veins will pop a little better, and it makes it easier for them to draw the blood. So,
how do you find a place to donate blood? Like, how does one do that? I'm interested in it because I've never really done it, but I don't know how to even get started.
redcrossblood.org, and you just type in your zip code, and it'll tell you if there are blood drives nearby, or you're near Minneapolis. I'm sure they have a full-time blood donation center. It might be in a hospital, actually.
Somebody told me they have donuts afterwards, so that's kind of the only reason why I'm interested.
Well, it depends on where you go. In my town upstate, I'm a member of the Lions Club there, and we run a blood drive. And so all the food afterward is homemade sandwiches and snacks that the Lions Club members have made for the blood donors. And but then I give blood at the Red Cross office in New York City, and it's like the little bags of Oreo cookies. So it's not I've never run across homemade donuts yet, Will. So I'm sorry.
Disappointment. I'll still give it a try though at some point.
Well, it's something that they can't make in a factory. You know, they can't. The people need blood, and the cool thing is you know, if there is a man-made or natural disaster in one part of the country, and you're on the other side of the country, and you're like, well, how can I help? You know, you can donate money to various causes to help people, but if you donate blood, they can air freight it. Blood stays, I think they keep blood for 10 days or 20 days. Anyway, you keep it cool. Blood is this portable life source. So if you want to help out, you just go to your local blood donor facility or a blood drive. And if they need your blood where the catastrophe is, they just ship it over there. So
I can't remember the name of the company, but there's a company out there that actually organizes the shipment of blood and organs and stuff like that, where, you know how there's a network of private and commuter jets that are constantly flying between all these kind of smaller areas and larger areas of the country, where when they're taking off, they go, here's our flight schedule. The hospital truck shows up, they put the cooler and whatever onto there, and then they fly it to whatever location it needs to go to. And there's no charge for it. Like all the commuter jet companies and the private jet companies all use that airspace. They're like, hey, we can easily fit a cooler full of, you know, whatever needs to be transported. And that's how they transport, I don't want to say organs and stuff like that, but organs and blood and any of the vital things where, you know, we need to get a heart from somewhere to somebody in Kansas City. They'll take the next commuter flight and put it on there and fly it down and do that. I was reading an article in the Times about that about 6 months ago. They were talking about it.
How cool is that? The New York Times, you read that?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, we didn't really talk about Thanksgiving, but this podcast is coming out on Thanksgiving week, which is a big shopping week in the United States, at least. And if you're going to shop on Amazon, would you consider using our affiliate link? That gives us a little finder's fee for you going to Amazon and buying stuff. And it doesn't affect the prices you pay. It just gives us a little finder's fee and helps us pay the bills here. So if you want to use the link gardenfork.tv/Amazon, that'll take you directly to Amazon, but it has a little tag in it that says, hey, Eric from Garden Fork sent me, so go thank Eric. And I thank you for using that, gardenfork.tv/Amazon. There's a link in the show notes as well, but gardenfork.tv/Amazon goes a long way to help us. All right? I mentioned the New York Times in one of my videos, the Mississippi pot roast video, and somebody made a very crude comment about the fact that I read the New York Times, and I made the mistake of engaging with the person.
Yeah, you know, I look at it as it's where the articles are. I mean, I just happened to come up on the news feed and it looked interesting, and you know, I clicked on it and looked at it and, you know, thought about it, and it just gave me a moment of pause to think about something outside of the realm of what's in my world. And, you know, if people do it for that, that's great. You know, if you get kind of consumed in it, that can be troublesome, but, you know, take it all in moderation.
I do. The positive comments outshine the negative ones. And what's really interesting is I just posted a video about installing a window in my buddy's house. And I was like, well, this is kind of interesting. And I just, you know, I do something and I make a video about it. And I'm like, well, let's see if people react to this or not. And the comments are very interesting. I just didn't think it was that much of a conversation starter. And people are talking about all sorts of stuff with this window I put in.
Well, actually, I watched the video just last night, and it was very interesting because, like, I'm exposed to stick frame construction. Like, you've seen some of the projects we've done where I've got stick frame construction where it's made out of 2x4s and sheetrock and everything like that. And I've never thought about, like, you have a video where you're doing some plumbing work and, like, you open up the wall and I see all this wire inside of mesh conduit and, you know, cast iron to copper to PVC to PEX to whatever, you know, different styles and stuff like that. And to see the challenges that other people overcome when they're doing DIY projects, you know, I kind of look at it as like, oh, I got to do sheetrock or I got to do window work. And I know the materials that I'm dealing with. You have a whole nother skill set to deal with the situation that you have. So it was really interesting to see. I've never thought about replacing a window in a brick wall and what you'd need to do. So it's really something good for people to take a watch of.
Yeah, most of the buildings in the city are made of brick or steel. Wood buildings burn. So it's interesting, though. We do have wood frame houses in my neighborhood, but they are smaller. They can't build them as big. And I don't have a very big house, but it's 3 stories. But it's there's plaster wall, and right behind the plaster wall is brick. The interior walls are plaster on studs, but it's dimensional lumber. It's an actual 2-inch by 4-inch stud.
Wow.
But when you open the walls, you're opening up 110, 120 years of history and what the last DIY guy did, you know?
Have you ever found anything interesting in the wall, like old newspapers or a Spider-Man #1 or anything like that?
Well, yeah, actually, my buddy's house where we made the video, Brian's house, he's been in some of the videos. We opened up one of the walls and there were newspapers from World War II.
Wow.
And, like talking about the menace and the Axis. And it was interesting. I mean, some of it was kind of run-of-the-mill news, but a couple of the bigger headlines were, World War II events. So, yeah, he's got those. It was kind of interesting. It was like a time capsule from, 70, 80 years ago. So, well, no, I'm sorry, 70 years ago. So, neat.
Pretty amazing.
But, yeah, I mean, I don't know if people understood, the row houses are all connected, and depending on when they were built, they sometimes have air shafts down them. So if there's 2, and usually houses were built 10 at a time, and they just have a common wall between. They don't have each house wasn't built separate and just nudged up next to them. They built them all at once. So they're townhouses. And for the interior rooms that were considered a bedroom, they have to have a window. And so they put these kind of octagonal, is that the right word? Air shafts down in the middle of between the 2 buildings. And that's where we were working. We were putting in windows into the air shaft. And the thing is, your neighbor might have these all beat up windows. And a lot of times they would just plywood or brick the things up. In the modern day when they do like a quickie renovation or something like that. So, but we were lucky. The replacement windows fit in quite nice. And somebody asked why we didn't put vinyl windows in, and we put in metal ones. You can also get metal windows that are made with wood and clad with metal. But I've never put in a vinyl window. I just don't have any experience with them. Have you?
Yeah, actually, that's they're like a poly window almost. You ever see that material where they grind up plastic and then they make extruded plastic frames and things like that out of them?
Uh-huh.
That's basically the windows that we have. So they're fiberglass windows, but they're solid. So instead of having a wood inside, it's basically, if you cut it in half, it would just be a solid piece of plastic all the way through. And it's basically recycled plastic that they grind up and then they make into mold. So actually all of the windows on our cabin remodel project are all vinyl windows that were made from that solid material. So it's not a clad window, it's a solid vinyl window from, I think it's Anderson or Pella or something like that.
Huh, interesting.
One of those guys.
Yeah, I've just never had any experience with that, so I couldn't really address their question. So, but that's all up on YouTube. We'll link to what we're talking about in the show notes here, but you can find Will you just type in the Weekend Homestead in YouTube, he shows up.
Yep,
and
we have YouTube and Instagram are really our 2. Post a lot of pictures on Instagram with the little DIY projects and stuff like that we just don't have time to shoot videos for.
And you can find me at just type in Garden Fork on YouTube. So, but all this will be in the show notes of the show here. So, well, I think people have got to their destination. Will, is there anything else?
I think we're pretty good. I tried to keep it slow today for everybody. I didn't have any coffee before the podcast, so we should be good.
Harder one. So radio@gardenfork.tv. Always love to hear from you all. So thanks and make it a great day. Garden Fork's theme music is used under license from uniquetracks.com.